So you fell one win short of the ACC championship game, or maybe you were one win short of the college football playoff. Here are the trap games that could cost your favorite teams in the ACC dearly.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Also on this episode, we will take a deep dive on that ACC opener, Week 0, Florida State and Georgia Tech in Ireland. Brian Smith from Locked On Seminoles is going to join the show. We are going to talk about the ACC being the conference of quarterbacks. No conference in the country outside of this one has as many preseason honorees who play that position. Will they live up to the hype this year? You are watching Locked On ACC and listening. Thank you so much for making us your first listen and watch of the day. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. Kenton, when you were playing at NC State, did you ever, like before, a game against maybe a lesser opponent, did you ever say, hey, this one could be a trap game, we better watch out? And how do you deal with that mentally?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing mentally is prepare the right way for every game. I think that's the biggest thing. The minute that you think, oh, man, this team is terrible, they're last in the conference, they haven't beaten anybody, that's the minute that you forget they've got guys on scholarship too. They've got guys collecting NIL deals too. They've got everything that you have. They may have to a lesser degree, but they've still got something close or something adjacent or something that can counter it. So for me, it was about, every single time, everything I did, I need to prepare like, hey, this means the world to me. Every single thing I do, if I'm not doing it with everything I got in me, I'm doing it wrong. Because really, when you think about the essence of a trap game and how it happens, more often than not, that's what you hear from the coaches. Yeah, I knew it early in the week. We just weren't sharp. We just weren't crisp. We just weren't, I knew that the overconfidence was going to come. But, when you come into it with the right approach and the right, hey, this is still football. This is still a violent game that some days a team plays above their head, and we need to be prepared for that. Not prepared for, they're going to be their average selves. We're going to be our average selves. We need to prepare for it. If they're their best selves and we're our worst selves, we still need to be ready to whoop the wheels off.
Yeah, and that mentality is what separates champions from everybody else, to have that mentality that you talked about. And, I know it's something when we talk about trap games, I cover Miami, and it seems like almost every game can be viewed as a trap game, right? I mean, they've stepped on the rake, as you like to say so many times over the years.
Yeah.
But let's talk about for top teams in the league. I'd like to hear your take on NC State's biggest trap game. I can talk about Miami's. We'll talk about Florida State's and Clemson's potentially. And Kenton, I wonder if Miami and NC State might even have the same trap game this year, because both of these teams have to fly all the way out to Berkeley to take on Cal, which is the type of road trip you don't usually get in the Atlantic Coast Conference, but this is a new era for the ACC. Could it be Cal, or do you look at somebody else for NC State?
No, Cal is absolutely it for a multitude of reasons. And let me tell you why. When you look at Cal, they're not really in the traditional mode of a trap game where it's like, normally a trap game is a game that's wedged between two or somewhere between two ranked opponents, right? But it can also be a trap game in that you may lull yourself to sleep and, we can just beat everybody. And then all of a sudden, the Golden Bears are coming and kicking down your door. All of a sudden, you're watching the number one in 3 letters, OTT, running into the end zone a lot. So the Cal game is absolutely a trap game because, again, you're flying across the country in a turnover that is shorter than anything that teams see regularly in college football for the most part. You do not regularly expect, I'm going to have to get up and fly X amount of hours to place A, B, and C every week and then come back and play a game immediately after that. So when you look at NC State, Kyle, you're looking at a situation where it's October 12th is Syracuse, October 19th is Cal, and then you get a little bit of a break in terms of a bye week before you have to play Stanford November 2nd. So it is a trap game, but it's kind of not a trap game in that it's more of a push game. It's more of a how do you finish out before your bye week, because this is the only game you got to prepare for the next 2 weeks. This is the only one. We're really next 3 weeks. This is the only one you got to prepare for. So how do you lock in and say, all right, we got to take care of Cal. We got to take care of our bodies. We got to get our rest. We got to know they're 3 hours behind us. We're going to be playing at what feels like midnight to us. How do you handle it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to say Cal as well for Miami, but I'll look at another one on Miami's schedule, and I know that it's a team that's kind of new money, and they just started playing better under Golesh, and that's USF. But the thing is, Kenton, they punched above their weight and gave Alabama some problems last year. They also USF tends to play up and down to the competition. Like they've also struggled against fellow Group of 5 teams and even FCS teams at times, but anytime, Miami takes on like a smaller division school within the state of Florida, it becomes the Super Bowl for that team. And that's going to be on the road in Tampa. So I'm not sleeping on UCF, and hopefully Miami isn't either, because that could turn into a trap game on the road week 3 pretty quickly. Now I'm wondering for Florida State and for Clemson this year, because I'm looking at this article, 24/7 Sports, that they put out a trap game for every team in the ACC, biggest trap game. Now, for Clemson, Kenton, I don't even know if this should be a trap game, because I think the team that they're going up against is really good. They consider at Virginia Tech to be Clemson's trap game. That's not usually the type of game that I would call the trap game, because on the road in Blacksburg, you've been there in person, you know how tough that is. Every Clemson player knows that that's going to be a tough environment. And Virginia Tech's going to be well within the top half of the ACC this year. I don't know if I'd consider that a trap game.
I think that it's only being considered a trap game because of the difference in caliber in terms of their recent success. But if you are looking at this thing with a clear head, that game, I hate to say it, not only could it not be considered a trap game, some people may look at that game and say, man, Virginia Tech might have to win this game. And I know everybody's saying, oh, I'm just doubling down and tripling down on my Clemson is primed for a fall off here. But I really want you to think about this schedule, okay? Georgia is your first game. Now, let's just say that there's no hangover from a potential loss in the first game. Who's your second game?
Appalachian
State. Giant Slayer.
Yeah, thank you.
App State.
Yeah. That's the trap game.
But you know what? It's okay, because after the Giant Slayer, they get a break. No, NC State.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's okay, because they got Stanford after that, and they probably shouldn't have to play another tough team until Florida State the next week. I am telling you right now, there is very much so a world. I'm not saying it happens. I'm saying that there's a world where I'm not shocked if Clemson comes out of those first 4 games 2-2 or worse.
I can see that.
That's a very real possibility. And when you look at that situation, it's tough to call Virginia Tech a trap game, because even if Clemson unless Clemson were to upset Georgia, I don't think there's a world where people look at them as like a 2-touchdown favorite against Virginia Tech, where it's like if you fall to them, it's clear you were sleeping at the wheel. I just don't think that's the case, especially traveling into Blacksburg with a game that, if they're good, will probably be a night game.
Yeah, and I'm with you on, like, I would define a trap game just like that, like a game you're favored by 10 points, 14 points, and you come up and lay an egg, right? And then I co-signed App State. App State is my pick for Clemson, Giant Killers. And then the narrative's perfect, because that App State game, that's the hangover sandwich right between Georgia and NC State. So if there's a game you're just naturally going to overlook, it would be the one that goes between two of those. Now, maybe Clemson fans would say, if they do find a way to upset Georgia, they'd be riding so high, they're just going to steamroll whoever's in their way. And then if they get blown out by Georgia, they're going to be so focused on revenge, and App State's going to be the team that they make. But still, you got a lesser opponent in between two really, really big games. I think that's the trap. We'll talk about who Florida State's trap is. Could it be Georgia Tech week 1? I don't know. We'll talk about that when we come back. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Guys, the Ibata app has saved me so much money, and it's summertime now, which means it's barbecue season. Stock up on all your grilling favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibata. So you won't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs. You can get both. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibata user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores or Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. It's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibata to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata using code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store using code LOCKEDONCollege. And thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Kenton, I might co-sign on this one. 24/7 Sports considers Florida State's biggest trap game to be on the road at SMU. I'm kind of digging that one. Again, it's a team. I know SMU is like a trendy kind of under the radar pick, but I would imagine the Seminoles are going to be favored big in that game, and we know that Mustangs offense is going to be able to put up points.
Not only that, when you talk about the idea of a trap game and how it happens, right? You talk about the dynamics of all the different things that you'll be looking at here. Objectively speaking, what happens most times in trap games? We say they're overlooking them, and then they lose that game. Quick question, Donno. Who's the next game on the schedule after SMU?
Let's see. They got SMU, and then they host Clemson the following week. Yeah. Yeah.
They got a Clemson team that's going to be looking to get some get back after they beat them in Death Valley last year. And that team is that's going to be a team that, again, they're just as I said, there's a world where Clemson is up 2-2 or worse out of those first 4 games. There's also a world where they're 3-1 or better potentially. And so how would Florida State look at SMU, who's a first-timer in the conference, when they're looking at this Clemson team is like, damn, they're back. Dabo didn't need the portal. They're back. There's no fall off here. It's a moment where you have to say to yourself, there is a lot of potential for Florida State to kind of, oh, yeah, we're just going to show up and whoop the wheels off. What did Rhett Lashley just do? Yeah, what happened? Preston Stone threw for how many yards?
Oh, man, no, I completely agree. And speaking of Preston Stone and the ACC's quarterbacks, I was looking at, of course, we talked about the Maxwell watch list a couple of weeks back. The ACC leads nominations for the Maxwell, including the most quarterbacks on the list. The Johnny Unitas watch list recently came out. That's another award that's given out to quarterbacks. The ACC leads all conferences and nominees there. And the O'Brien Trophy, the Davey O'Brian Award preseason watch list also came out, Kenton, and the ACC leads all conferences with 8 quarterbacks nominated to that list, and Preston Stone is on it, the redshirt junior quarterback from SMU. You also have Cade Klubnik from Clemson on the list, DJ Uiagalelei at Florida State, Haynes King at Georgia Tech, who actually led the ACC in touchdown passes last year with 29, Cam Ward, who's now at Miami after putting up huge numbers at Washington State the last couple of years, Grayson McCall now at NC State after putting up huge numbers at Coastal Carolina, Kyle McCord at Syracuse, Kyron Drones of Virginia Tech is on that list. And yeah, obviously the guy who's going to get the most preseason love on that watch list is Cam Ward, because the statistical resume already speaks for itself for what he's done. But then I'm wondering, like, man, that Kyron Drones, if I can throw a few bucks on that at FanDuel, if there's odds for him winning the O'Brien, that you could do worse things with a few bucks.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me tell you something. There are people still buying stuff off the TikTok shop. There are absolutely worse things that you can do with a few bucks than put them on Kyron Drones. Okay.
What is the TikTok shop? I don't even know what that is.
So on TikTok, there's a feature where you can go to a shop that is specifically like, oh, there are all these stores that are aligned somehow through the app that are going to send you your stuff. And it's like, yeah, sure. These companies are actually sending you your. They're not. They're not. Some of them are not. Some of the products don't look anything like what they're advertised to be, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I say all that to say there are many worse things that you could do with your money than put a little something on that action. So with that in mind, if the odds look right, I'll be there every night. Put a little something on it. Put a little dab of ranch on that thing.
Is there anybody else on the list? Because again, Cam Ward is probably the safest pick, and he's got a really good offensive line. He's playing behind at Miami, a lot of talent to throw the football to. I know there's going to be people obviously throwing money on DJU because they expect big things from Florida State this year. Anyone else you want to? I'll give you the opportunity. The floor is yours if you want to make the case for Grayson McCall.
I'm going to make the case for somebody else.
Ooh.
Because his team only has to win 7, maybe 8 games for him to win this award. I don't think they will, but if they win 7, 8 games, he will win this award. Thomas Castellanos.
Yeah, and he's not even on. He wasn't even on the list.
And I was just about to say, I don't think that he's on these watch lists. But if you have seen that young man play, you know that he pulls off some of the greatest backpack jobs I have ever seen. Again, a team that without him loses to NIU by 2+ touchdowns.
Right.
You saw what I saw last year. Before Castellanos came in that game and saved that team, oh boy, it was going to look ugly. AJ Black was struggling to even tweet through that thing. That's how bad it was. And so if that team, if they can get it to 8, man, I don't think he needs more than 8. I think if that team gets to 8 wins, people will say, they will sing his praises worlds over. They will build him the statue outside of Boston College Stadium because, again, I don't see it at any position offensively where I'm like, yeah, they're ready to roll up there at BC except the quarterback position. So we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, and Castellanos, he did make the watch list for the Johnny Unitas Award. Well, let me give you it must just be a bigger watch list because there's a lot more ACC quarterbacks on there than the 8 who made the O'Brien. So for the Johnny Unitas Award, it's Castellanos made the list, Fernando Mendoza of Cal, Cade Klubnik at Clemson, DJU at Florida State, Haynes King, Georgia Tech, Tyler Shuck, Louisville, Cam Ward, Miami, Grayson McCall, NC State, Nate Yarnell, Pitt, Preston Stone, SMU, Ashton Daniels at Stanford, Kyle McCord, Syracuse, Kyron Drones, Virginia Tech. So the Unitas watch list basically said, you get a nomination, you get a nomination, you get a but still the ACC did have more than any other conference. So it seemed like every quarterback in the conference was nominated, but they still got more than anyone else.
Well, Donno, I was told the ACC don't play no real football. I was told that we just kind of show up and bow at the altar of the almighty SEC and Big Ten. That's what I was told. And now, lo and behold, we've got as many, if not more, ball players on some of these watch lists than anybody else. Interesting. Very shocking, if you will, that those lowly old boys from the ACC on both coasts have found a way to have their lowly little quarterbacks be on these watch lists.
Well, one of the quarterbacks who was on both watch lists is DJ Uiagalelei. Brian Smith from Locked On Seminoles is going to join the show when we come back, specifically to preview that opening game. Could Georgia Tech be a trap game for Florida State? They're going to be playing in Ireland. FSU big favorites this weekend, so you want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And I already know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. And yeah, you can get action on that season opening game, week 0. How's Florida State's offense going to travel across the pond? How's Georgia Tech's defense going to travel is probably the bigger question. And guys, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. And yeah, you can get action on that game with Florida State -13. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And we'll have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back into Locked On ACC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Guys, make sure you're checking out our ACC preview. It's going to be dropping on Wednesday. Full preview of the conference. Going to be available free on Locked On ACC YouTube. Free where you get your audio podcasts, everywhere you get your audio pods. But, we'll talk big picture on Florida State with Brian Smith on that date. But meanwhile, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the game on Saturday. We got Brian Smith with us from Locked On Seminoles. So in Ireland, Brian, Florida State, defending ACC champs, they're roughly 2 touchdown favorites, 13-point favorites against Georgia Tech. Any real causes for concerns there on the Yellow Jackets side, or do you think this is going to be a routine Florida State victory?
I think that the Jackets have a chance because they can score. Defensively, they brought in Santucci from Duke. He's a good coordinator, but it's first year for their scheme. They brought in several guys. I don't necessarily believe playing Florida State at their size, experience, and speed in game 1 is ideal. But they also have a playmaker in Haynes King at quarterback that had 29 touchdown passes to lead the league last year. Unfortunately, also had 16 interceptions. Part of that is because they knew they had a porous defense that was dead last in the Power 5 last year in yards rushing allowed. They gave up 221. Even if they go up 50 yards, it's still not where you need to be. Zeke Biggers is a guy that I like a lot, a defensive lineman. They got a really good linebacker, but I don't know if their depth is there. They need to have a lead in this game and dictate the pace so that they're not playing from behind, because I don't think they got the depth to hang with Florida State in a game where they're down 10 going into the fourth quarter. I like Florida State to win by 10 or more.
Yeah, I'm looking at it the same way. And you talked about it a little bit, that Jackets defense. Kenton Gibbs and I talk about this all the time. Styles make fights, and Georgia Tech's rushing defense was so bad. I don't have enough reason to believe they'll be considerably better this year, even in a new scheme. So it's just going to be a really tough matchup. And then on the Florida State side, though, Brian, there are a lot of new faces. This is a team that just had 10 players drafted into the NFL, including a lot of the straws that stir the drink on the offensive side of the football. Jordan Travis, no longer a Seminole. DJ Uyunglele comes in to replace him, also losing your top receivers and Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson from last year. So how you feeling about that offense, Brian? And is it going to rely a lot on Toafili in the ground game?
Well, there's 2 parts to this. Number one, the running back depth chart is ridiculous.
Crazy.
They didn't put 1, they put 2 spots at running back, a bigger back and a smaller back, and they're 3 deep at both. They're good.
Wow.
I know they lost the guy to the draft. He's really good. I get it, but Florida State will be fine at running back. My question is at receiver. They lose not 1, but 2 guys drafted, and they're playmaking. Like Keon in particular, when he's healthy, he's just an incredible playmaker. Johnny was a 6'6.5" guy. They didn't know how to guard. Now you got Malik Benson. Okay, he's their guy. He's the transfer from Bama. But who else is really going to step up? Jaylen Brown, a kid from Miami, ironically, went to LSU, transferred in. He's got 1 outside spot secured. We haven't seen Hakeem Williams ascend yet. He's actually listed behind Malik, which surprised me on the depth chart. Ja'Kai Douglas, a 5th-year senior, is a little slot guy that's very consistent. But receiver is the biggest concern going into the season. They have improved quite a bit at linebacker. I feel much better there. And their secondary will be very, very talented, and so will the front. I think the ACC's Defensive Player of the Year will be Patrick Payton, if I had to guess, because he's going to be unleashed.
Now, in college football, they don't have like a uniform policy on releasing depth charts like the way they
Right.
do in the NFL, where you're required to
Oh,
release
yeah,
periodic
totally.
depth charts and stuff. So, Mike Norvell, he volunteered a Georgia Tech depth chart. Any idea on the psychology behind it, Brian? Might it be maybe to send messages to certain players? Is it just to give the fans and the media something to chew on for the next several days?
It's amazing because all fall camp, I was surprised that people were like expecting more for those that did. Norvell talks around a lot of points. He doesn't want to give much, but then he releases the depth chart. The two don't match.
No.
I'm a little baffled, but I give him credit. In the 90s, the only two teams that constantly did this kind of stuff were Nebraska and Florida State. Why? Because they were better than everybody. They didn't care.
Yeah.
So it's different. Now you're looking at it like, okay, they're climbing up, but Florida State's not the best program. They may not even be the best program in the ACC. You could argue otherwise. And he goes, so here you go. So I wonder if it's a little bit of what Bowden used to do. Okay, come and beat us or not. Yeah. But he was very confident at his media press conference on Sunday. Like he was really giddy. He was super happy how camp ended. And to their luck, knock on wood, they haven't had any significant injury to my knowledge all through. That's huge. Yeah. So he's pretty happy about it. But now you got to show it. People shouldn't take Georgia Tech lightly. Again, they can definitely score. Got a great running back returning. Got a good quarterback, etc. Got a lot of speed. But they got to stop Florida State up front. They are very experienced. So we'll see what happens. But the depth chart thing, that just blew me away. I did not see that coming.
Well, when that thing dropped, because I did see a few Florida State fan posts that were like complaining about certain things, or like I don't know if those are just the outliers of the fan base, but how was that received? And are there any? You talked about a few of the finer points of it, but were there any seismic surprises that made Florida State fans go like, "What is that?"
Well, Hakeem is the one that maybe it's just because I've seen him play in high school, and everybody wants to see a 6'2", 215-pound guy that can run like a deer in the starting lineup. I get it. But he apparently is not quite ready. So that's one. Otherwise, I mean, Cam Riley, the guy that transferred from Auburn, kind of ascended towards the middle of Florida State's fall camp. He has a spot, but it's listed as or with Blake Nicholson, the young guy that got out of California. There's a bunch of ors. People don't know. Kevin Knowles sometimes gets beat on a little bit. I think he's a pretty good player. But Earl Little, the guy that transferred in from Bama, it's either him or Knowles at the nickel spot. There's a few things like that, but like nothing is shocking to me. And the offensive line in particular is super deep.
That's very deep. Yeah.
Florida State fans, I think they're just kind of getting used to winning again. Nothing is perfect in fall camp. There will be somebody laying an egg this coming Saturday for them, and it won't start next game. That's my guess. It's just part of football. So let's play the first game before we complain too much.
Totally. He does an awesome job. Host of Locked On Seminoles. He is Brian Smith. You can follow him on X at FBScout_Florida. So over in Ireland this Saturday, it's going to kick off college football, kick off the ACC schedule. Florida State taking on Georgia Tech. Awesome info as always from Brian. And we will talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On ACC, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.